It is gold. I mean, it is Schwarzenegger and his little buddy, Franco Columbo, who just cause havoc. And it is really, you see Schwarzenegger. He's like, when I'm lifting weights, it's like I'm coming. When I'm out in the show, it's like I'm coming. I'm just coming all the time.
Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down the Nakatomi Tower at the Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Alan, John McClane...
Welcome back to Shat the Movies, the podcast where we ask, were the movies we loved when we were growing up really that good? Have you caught yourself thinking, why don't they make movies like they used to? Can you still remember spending your Friday night searching for the perfect movie rental at Blockbuster Video? Do you know what Blockbuster Video is? If you answered yes, then this is the podcast for you. I'm Gene Lyons, and alongside is my co-host, Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And once again, the guest host phenomenon, Kerri Gross.
Hello, hello.
And we're going to take a look back in time and decide if our favorite films still hold up. Each week, the audience selects from 6 movie choices that we break out the race car VHS tape rewinder and watch the movie that tally the highest number of votes. At the end of each podcast, Big D, Kerri, and I will provide the audience with the number of wipes each movie would take to get off our respective bums. So find a comfortable spot on the sofa and accompany us for a journey through our vast VHS movie collections. Big D, exciting week this week. What do you have in store for us?
Well, this was I believe it was a fan recommendation that they wanted to see Masters of the Universe. So I tried to build a category around that. So we went with fantasy heroes. In last place was Clash of the Titans. Third place, Flash Gordon, which is a great one and we should do eventually. Masters of the Universe came in second place. And the winner by an additional 5% was Conan the Barbarian from 1982.
Woohoo!
Hell yeah.
It's funny, when you posted this one up, I really didn't have a preference either way. I mean, I knew that I didn't want to watch Masters of the Universe because it was really a movie that sort of ruined the genre for a while. If you notice, it was on the tail end of that trend, and then nothing was made for years after that. But Flash Gordon was really a favorite of mine, and I'm so glad that that the listeners picked Conan because it really found its way into my heart this time around.
I'll give myself credit there as a listener before I even recorded with you guys. I voted on all the movies that you have posted so far. I definitely picked Conan. Even though I have never seen it, I picked it because I was like, fuck it, that seems like it's going to be funny.
I secretly was pulling for Masters of the Universe just because I know it's going to be a shit show. Or Flash Gordon. I was not expecting anything of Conan. I thought it was going to be kind of what you think of Conan if you haven't seen it. You're going to think it's just this dumb meathead, violence. There's not going to be much thought behind it. I sat and started watching this, and thank God, thank you listeners. This was a pleasure to sit down and watch.
Yeah, walking into this one, I think I said this to Kerri. I said, after we watched Casino, I said, well, next week's going to be a cakewalk. We're just going to have this shit movie that we're going to rip apart. And I start off and I go, am I being too optimistic as this movie starts out? Turns out, no. So I hope people stick around and listen to this one. If you've poo-pooed Conan, if you haven't seen it before, let us give you the reasons to watch it because it's really quite good.
Yeah, so also I want to thank everybody who takes the time. This one, again, we had 1,100 people vote. So if you want to vote for what's coming up, it's shatthemovies.com/vote. So I added today natural disasters. So the 6 movies are Dante's Peak, Volcano, Armageddon, Deep Impact, Outbreak, and Alive. So those are on the website, ready for vote, and we have 11 weeks of movies up there. Keep writing them in. We've gotten some great suggestions, and I'm going to try to catch up and add them all this week.
All right, so this week's movie, Conan the Barbarian, is a 1982 American fantasy adventure film directed and co-written by John Milius. The film stars Arnold Schwarzenegger and James Earl Jones and tells the story of a young barbarian who seeks vengeance for the death of his parents at the hands of Thulsa Doom, the leader of a snake cult. In case you were wondering, while watching this movie, Schwarzenegger did perform most of his own stunts, and the editing process took over a year, and they actually cut a lot of the violence out of it because it was deemed too violent a film. It was a commercial success for its backers, grossing more than $100 million at box offices around the world, but that is short of being considered a blockbuster. So this is still in the pantheon of blockbusters. This falls into more of a big movie than a blockbuster, even though it has quite a cult following.
Yeah, one of the things I learned, we're doing a little research that I was shocked was Oliver Stone wrote the first version of the screenplay for this. Then I found out afterwards that his entire script got scrapped because he had it in the future after there's been some kind of a civilization has fallen and it's going to be desolate with creatures. It would have cost $70 million in 1982 money. So they said, this is going to work. So they brought in John Milius, who ended up writing and directing it. But when I saw Oliver Stone's name, I was like, okay, maybe there is something here.
Yeah, I saw that he wrote that script, and my favorite genre of film is like dystopian, futuristic, rundown world. And even with that in mind at the beginning of the film, at the end of it, I was like, I would totally pay to see a remake of this, but set in a futuristic dystopian setting where there's like children being imprisoned and their families being murdered by this like snake cult leader and like maybe more cannibalism. So plant that in someone's head that they need to remake this movie, but dystopian futuristic instead of medieval time.
Before any readers' heads explode, I do want to say we're aware of the remake with Jason Momoa, and no, not that. We're talking something much better than that. Big D, where were you when you first saw Conan the Barbarian?
So as you so eloquently put it last week, I'm the old man on the podcast. Back in the day when this came out, I was 9 years old, and I was far too young to sneak into an R-rated movie, so I had to sit, and the highlight of the month when my parents had cable was they would come out with, it was HBO, and it was the movie channel had a movie guide that you would get the first of the month, and it would show you all the big movies that were coming on, and I remember it vividly, so much so that I today Googled it to look it up, and it was the Sword and the Sorcerer, Star Trek The Wrath of Khan, and Conan. So I remember, and back then, it didn't come out right away or a couple months later. You had to wait almost a full calendar year. So this was when I finally saw it. It was in 1983, a year after it had come out. And I got to tell you, I was excited, almost as excited as I was today to rewatch it.
Yeah, I wish I'd had that same degree of excitement as you, Big D. I remember it being on like broadcast channels when I was a kid. So in Arizona, we had a lot of local broadcast channels that you kind of flip through on the TV, and obviously it was heavily edited, and it didn't really interest me that much. It just seemed kind of corny, but I think they took a lot of the good stuff out. But as an adult, one of my friends showed me a clip of the What is Best in Life scene, and I immediately was like, I gotta watch this movie. Like, the writing is so surprisingly good and clever, and true to the material that, you know, you can't really scoff at it. It starts off as like, you know, it's got that sound of an old movie, the sort of a Spartacus kind of sound to it, but the writing is super current. So I absolutely loved it.
And often when people show you like, hey, here's some clips of this movie you got to see, often it's the best clips of the movie. I think with Conan, it acts, you know, kind of in reverse. The clips make it look dumb. You don't get the whole picture. So when you see him punching a camel or you see him, you're going to expect that it's going to be just a clown show. But it's not at all. Don't ever show people the clip. Sit them down and make them watch it. But what about you, Junior Kerri? Did you go diving into the $5 bin?
No. Apparently, it's very, very easy to watch this movie for free on the internet. But I was going to ask you guys, since you saw it on TV, how does this movie translate on TV? Is there just no orgies? The whole movie is orgies and porn, like softcore porn and like sweaty bodies. How was it on TV?
On HBO, it was As You See. And yes, this and Excalibur, that was the first two movies that made my little boy pajamas tingle.
This, I had never seen it before. And when I told my boyfriend that this is the movie we were going to review, he's like, it is one of my favorite movies of all time. And he's a huge fantasy nerd. And I would say I'm not a huge, but I love fantasy, dystopian, science fiction, and I'd never seen it. And I guess, like you were saying, how you only see the shitty clips of it, you know, like it seemed like a mock movie. So it was a first for me. But yeah, I'll tell you guys how I felt about it later.
All right, Big D, on that note, before we give away too much, let's roll that trailer.
speak. My daughter travels east to Thulsa Doom and his mountain of power. She is to be his.
Only the girl. We kill Thulsa Doom another day.
You have come to me, my son. Who now is your father if it is not me? Look at the strength of your body, the desire in your heart. I gave you this.
A sword is forged by a blacksmith who then shows it to his young son Conan, as he tells him of the riddle of steel and the importance of metal to their people, the Cimmerians. The Cimmerians are massacred by a band of raiders led by Thulsa Doom. Conan's father is killed by dogs, and his sword is taken by Doom to decapitate Conan's mother. The children are taken into slavery and then chained to work a large mill, the Wheel of Pain.
Okay, so no longer is the excuse, oh, it was the 1980s. Technology wasn't there. Special effects weren't where they are today. That's bullshit. This movie destroys half of the movies we've done's excuses. Okay, this movie opens, the opening credit sequence, it's simple and effective. You've got the sword being forged in the fire. You have an epic score. It couldn't have cost anything to make, but it's so effective and compelling. The story just drags you in. So I don't want to hear anybody say, oh, you know, it was limited, because this movie did it on a shoestring budget, and it was a compelling story from the first moments.
Yeah, you're absolutely on point, Big D. That opening score and the sword forging it was just flat out exciting. It was beautiful, powerful music. And I love that they used that black backdrop with only the flames and the forged steel to contrast. I started thinking about, I had to do some research because I was like, these swords look badass that they're forging. $10,000 a piece. The two swords they forged for Conan. Again, just they put the money in the right places. They didn't go crazy with, claymation and CGI and all that crap. They went with what works, and it reinforces that motif of steel in this movie.
I thought it looked very theatrical with the costumes and the setting and the backdrop. I thought that it didn't look like this cheesy 80s style movie. It actually reminded me of 60s, early 70s, I'm thinking Elizabeth Taylor, Cleopatra, just almost opera, beautiful attention to detail in the costumes and stuff that I was impressed with it. It all, even when they had that low budget, it all flowed really beautifully.
I mean, you look, it was all real chainmail. The pelts that Conan's wearing and the people in his village, that shit was real animal pelts. Even Game of Thrones, you got Jon Snow wearing that IKEA fake rug that they came out with afterwards, that the production used, these fake throw rugs that IKEA was selling. In this movie, it looks great. The helmets look like they're legitimate cast helmets. Everything looks great. And I don't know how did other movies just fall so short?
I don't know if everything looks great. So there was that scene with Conan and his father, and you've got that green screen background of the sky.
Oh, yeah.
What I don't get is that they shot so many open field scenes. What was that all about? It was the one part where I was just it distracted me from the badass riddle of steel. And again, that whole idea that he's talking about, this you can trust. I was like, that's actually some pretty good writing. It made an impact on me.
I think that happened because the original intent of John Milius was to have Arnold Schwarzenegger do all the narration throughout the story. But when Universal started hearing the dailies, his accent was too heavy and his English wasn't up to snuff. So they eventually switched it over so that Mako becomes the narrator. But I imagine that maybe in that first scene, there was some narration that Conan would do over the forging in his father. So maybe it seemed like it was an add-on, that it wasn't originally planned.
I don't know. As soon as the narrator started, I was like, is this fucking Mr. Miyagi? Like, is this Karate Kid narrating and then I read that, of course, they wanted Arnold Schwarzenegger, and it just didn't translate very well as narrating the movie. And as you'll see later in the movie, I mean, he doesn't talk very much during the whole thing. So it made sense to have somebody else narrate it.
Most of the times I have a problem with exposition, but it's effective. They do it just enough to get you in world. We don't need to see 35 minutes of Conan's origin story. And when you pair that with the music, it kicks ass.
Right. That music, by the way, is by Basil Constantine Polidoris, who he won awards for doing the music for Lonesome Dove, but I thought it all sounded very familiar. And it's interesting that this movie I really enjoyed. And I looked at the other movies that he did the score for: RoboCop, Red Dawn, Hunt for Red October, Free Willy, Starship Troopers. All those are movies that are very moving, and you can't quite explain why. The music tells half the story in this film. You don't even have to have dialogue in some parts, which is not to say that this movie is entirely just setup. There's actually some pretty decent battle in it. It's not like current Game of Thrones level, 2018 summer blockbuster level, but it is superior to a lot of medieval clashes we've seen on film. And again, we're talking about movies that came out after this: Willow, The Highlander, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. In this movie, they didn't try to do anything unbelievable. They kind of let chaos reign and they stuck to the basics: stabbing, falling off of shit, things catching fire. And that's not hard to do well.
No, and I love that they finally did something common sense that I always have a problem with. Whenever there's a battle going on, and there's always one guy who's like super skilled, like he's the best swordsman, and he's just slaying people left and right. Why doesn't somebody else go, hey, everybody go kill that guy? Instead, so it was nice to see that Conan's dad is just kicking ass. And whoever it was that was up on the horseback said, hey, everybody, stop what you're doing and kill that guy. I love common sense, and it works. Conan's dad was a badass.
That's what village raids sound like if they're led by kindergarten teachers. Okay, everybody. Okay, eyes on me. All right, listen, kill that guy. But and again, not only is the battle great, but the deaths actually have an impact on you. We haven't heard a single word out of Conan's mom, but the way that they shot her beheading, you're moved by it. This is exactly what the Empire Strikes Back did wrong with the Wampa battle. Like the Wampa losing a limb, it looks comical because they shot it all wrong. Here, you take the focus off the severed part. You're not focusing on the head, and you're looking at the human reaction of Conan as a boy in slow motion, and then his mother's head, shockingly, just, again, if you hadn't seen the movie before, it's falling right in front of you. I thought it was really powerfully done.
I think it's the most impactful death of a mother since Bambi, because it's shot in a way that you don't know. Is Doom going to let her live? Are they going to rape her? He just swings around, and it's silence. There's no sound. And as she slowly falls and pulls her hand away from young Conan, that you could understand why Conan would go to the edge of the earth to avenge his mother's death.
Yeah, I mean, that it was shot so beautifully, the slow-mo, the cinematography, his empty hand. But can we talk about the first scene with James Earl Jones? He has like some super hipster girl haircut with blunt bangs. I was giggling to myself until he kills Conan's mom. And I'm like, this is not a cheesy 80s movie. This is very serious. Just ignore his haircut.
Again, this might be too old for you guys. Have you ever seen Lemmy from Motorhead?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, he looks like one of Doom's henchmen. They look like they're slightly something off in their genetic code. The actors look enough like they've been eating lead paint chips growing up that they fit like they'd be in this Marauder band. But I want to also say, in 82, you got to go back. I don't ever remember seeing an African-American actor put into a lead role, especially as a villain like this. So I went back and I said, I want to look to make sure I'm not completely off base, because I'll sound like an idiot, which I sometimes do. And Roger Ebert, who's a film critic, you guys may have heard of him.
Never heard of him.
In his 1982 review, he actually wrote this. He said, the villain is played by the fine black actor James Earl Jones, who brings power and conviction to the role that seems inspired in equal parts by Hitler, Jim Jones, and Goldfinger. The fact that Ebert had to make it a point to say a black actor shows you how far ahead of the time this was.
Yeah, and what was great about it is that James Earl Jones, as ridiculous as and all the characters in this, they can look ridiculous, but somehow they're so committed to the roles that you just accept it. Like you're like, okay, I get it. And he's a complex villain in the sense that he's not like he evolves throughout the movie, right? He's not just some big strong force, but rather he's like kind of confusing. He's mystifying. What is he all about? So I don't know. I really enjoy James Earl Jones in this role.
Also, if you're a fan of Schwarzenegger, you've probably seen Pumping Iron, the 1977 docudrama. Have you guys seen it?
I was working in newspapers when Schwarzenegger was running for governor of California. So they trotted this movie out in attempts to, kind of stymie his campaign, and it did not work. It made him more popular.
Yeah, well, he actually tried early in the 90s to try to buy back because it was only on VHS. So he tried to get as many back as possible. I think it was 95. I found one on eBay. It is gold. I mean, it is Schwarzenegger and his little buddy, Franco Columbo, who just cause havoc. And it is really, you see Schwarzenegger. He's like, when I'm lifting weights, it's like I'm coming. When I'm out in the show, it's like I'm coming. I'm just coming all the time. And he's got his little buddy, Franco Columbo. You know the little like elf scout when they first attacked the village? The guy who looks greased up and he just doesn't fit the rest? That's Franco Columbo. He gave him a little cameo in the movie as the scout.
I thought you were going to say it was Danny DeVito, and then they later went on to make twins.
Oh, hell no. Franco Columbo's a big dude.
I was reading when I was researching the movie that when he became governor, that he actually had one of the swords like hanging behind his desk with a quote about Crom. Like as the governor, he's still carrying his Conan sword on his throne. But on the lines of, references to the movie, I was reading that director John Milius was in the Frank Frazetta documentary. If you guys are familiar with him, he's like the king of fantasy art, and he did a lot of like book and movie covers, but a lot of the specific scenes in the film with women that are like chained with cheetahs and snakes are actual recreations of his paintings. And I looked some of them up, and they're pretty spot on and pretty rad.
Yeah, during Wizard World in Chicago, there was a Frazetta gallery, and I got to go in there and looked at it. And I wasn't really familiar with his work, and I was like, this all looks like Conan the Barbarian. And you say that in the middle of a comic book convention, like everybody turns around, they're like, oh. But yeah, it's definitely, it's a direct, they stayed very true to this and to the 1930s comics that really spawned Conan, which have a very strong, the King Bee tells me have a very strong connection with Lovecraft. It was kind of like, almost like Lovecraft fan fiction. So a lot of the enemies and monsters that Conan will encounter throughout his tales exist in the Lovecraft universe as well, which makes it gives it incredible depth and kind of makes there's little cool nods here and there.
That's what I've always admired about a lot of science fiction and fantasy is there's so much commitment to like building the universe that they exist in, and like made up languages and characters, and I just really appreciate that they spend all that time building it up to be what it is.
So Conan evolves into adulthood. He becomes a massive man. He's trained to be a gladiator, and he wins countless fights, and he's freed. So as he's freed, he's chased by wild dogs, and he seeks refuge in a warrior's tomb where he retrieves an ancient sword. Conan wanders the world, encountering a prophetic witch, and then befriends a thief and archer, Subotai.
Again, they're super efficient with storytelling. To explain, how does Conan, number one, survive? It's a simple explanation. Conan is strapped to that giant grinding wheel. That's how he becomes so big. And then they start using him in human cockfights. So he's trained in the art of fighting. That's how he becomes proficient with the sword. It all makes sense. There's no need to stretch it out. And how badass was that giant wheel? That grinding wheel he's pushing? They actually built that somewhere.
Yeah, the Wheel of Pain. Everything's a something of something in this movie, by the way. If you ever want to write a fantasy novel or film, you do the Wheel of Pain, the Temple of Set, the Riddle of Steel. Like, just put of in front of in between any two words, the gene of Shat, and that's all you need. It's suddenly a thing. The hair of Conan. Hair of Conan, by the way, when he's pushing that wheel, I'm like laughing at his hair. Nope, that's actually Arnold Schwarzenegger's hair. That is not a wig.
Speaking of real things, apparently all those dogs chasing him were actually like very vicious dogs, and he was really running from them. And you can YouTube, there's like an outtake where he trips and falls when he's running up those rocks and is like attacked by one of the dogs. Like he's actually running for his life from these fucking dogs. That's real commitment.
Yeah, this is back in the day. I guess the ASPCA wasn't around, or just wasn't as strong. I mean, Conan is punching a fucking camel. There's those dogs. The vulture scene on the tree, that's a dead vulture. So the love of animals really wasn't around in the early 80s.
Yeah, I bet PETA shit a brick over this film. Every fucking character in this movie is draped in fur and leather. And then apparently all the blood in the movie they collected from local slaughterhouses. None of it was theatrical blood. It was all real blood. That vulture was real. He bit into a dead vulture. They made him like rinse his mouth out later. They tripped the horses. They like put tripwire so like the horses would stumble and fall. Apparently the Humane Society at the time, I don't know how far PETA dates back, but apparently the Humane Society was all up in arms about the treatment of animals in this movie.
I think the animal that was treated the worst in this movie though was the witch in the hut. She comes out and she's part animal. She's like super fucking sexy and crawling around. And then suddenly, and she's like, oh, I got to tell you a prophecy, but you kind of got to fuck me to do that. So that's cool. Right. And I was into it. I was like, okay, this is 82. Like you're supposed to be laughing at this movie. I wanted to laugh at this movie, but I find myself like, damn, like, all right. And then you think of the witch in like, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. You're like, no. This is what a witch is all about. And then, of course, Schwarzenegger, Conan introduces her to the Flu Network and just fucking tosses her in the fire, which is great. Like, I just love the way he just tosses shit aside. It's beautiful.
She says, do you want to come warm yourself by my fire? Conan doesn't even think, why is this woman out here alone? How has she survived being raped and murdered? He's just like, hell yeah. And it doesn't seem like he's stopping. I mean, he's having sex with her. She starts to turn. The lights go out. There's a giant burst of flames. Conan seemed like he wanted to wait till he finished and then throw her into the fire.
Well, she had to finish her message. Like it was slowly but surely while she was coming. She was like, you will find. And you're just like, find what? Find what? And then she screams, Zamora, what you're looking for. And then he throws her in the fire. So, I mean, there was a reason. She was set out to give him a message.
Yeah, as I'm watching this scene, I'm like, I would pay to see just this scene and walk out of the theater. I'd be like, that's enough for me. In 1982, this cost $2.94 to see this movie. If you told me, hey, $3, Gene, you can see an escaped bodybuilder gladiator fuck a shape-shifting witch and then throw her into a bottle rocket fire, I'd be like, fuck it, sell me a ticket.
Dude, but Conan's so fucking boss. He kills her and just sleeps there. He didn't even fucking think there's a trap in the house. He just fucking racks out in this witch's house that he just set her in fire and she burst into flames.
That was improvised.
I'm going to go to sleep. And he wakes up the next day refreshed, no concerns. Yeah, good for him.
It's important to point out. It's important to point out that the witch did not pop his cherry though. Like he'd fucked before.
Yeah, I mean, when Conan's forced to breed, that scene where it's like some young girl that's just given to him and they're told to breed. I'm thinking, how many fucking dudes in the 80s jerked to this medieval rape scene?
I mean, he's not today's hero, right? He's not that guy that's doing he's a barbarian. That's exactly what he is. And so when he's asked in that scene, what is best in life? This is not the way a hero talks, to crush your enemies, to see them driven before you and to hear the lamentations of their women. Like that is some brutal shit. But he's a fucking barbarian. Like, that's what he is. Now, he's a barbarian on the right side of things, but he's still not pulling any punches.
Yeah, but I want to go back even to what Kerri was talking about, the sex scene. When they give him the female to mate with, that they were breeding him. Today, we expect that our hero is going to do the right thing. And when he drapes, like, that fur over his shoulders, I was like, oh, Conan, are you really going to fucking sit down and, like, save her? Or are you gonna... Hell no. Conan takes her, throws her on the ground. The creepy part why I'd say this is not whacking material is that whole group of people standing at the cage, like looking in, like, oh, what's he doing? Like watching him. That made it creepy.
Apparently voyeurism dates back to the medieval times.
This is before the medieval times. This is primeval times.
Is this Middle Earth?
No, shut up. Don't even go there. Hell no. But the only thing I got to say that annoyed me, as everything is going really, really well, and I've made fun of it a few times, is this. Like, what is that? That's not even like, it's obviously ADR, but they could have had him like screaming. But instead, it sounds like he's being like raped. It seems like he's getting attacked.
It sounds like he just poured hot water on his feet or something.
That's supposed to be a soothing feeling, hot water on the feet. No, but I mean, I think that's how Schwarzenegger screams.
Can you imagine if he nuts, if that's what it sounds like when he comes? Oh.
And then just like the clinking of weights.
Yes.
So following the witch's advice, Conan and Subotai go to the city of Zamora to seek out Doom. There they meet Valeria, a female brigand. They burgle the Tower of Serpents and slay a giant snake. The thieves celebrate and Conan has sex with Valeria. The city guards capture the trio and bring them to King Osric, the usurper, who requests they rescue his daughter. So Subotai and Valeria are like, nope, we refuse to take up the quest. Conan sets off alone to the Temple of Set.
Man, so again, Conan looks good. When he's swinging the sword, it looks like it's actually a skill that he possesses. And found out that he did train in weapons, martial arts. He even learned to ride a horse. He was doing climbing techniques, and he had to learn to like fall from 15 feet. Because you said they had some stuntmen. They could not find stuntmen to replicate Schwarzenegger's body. So he did almost all of these stunts. And also, we made the comment about in Predator 2 about Danny Glover. The way he moves around, like his locomotion seemed kind of wonky, like there was something wrong with him. Arnold moves around with grace. He's a bigger guy. But when he's stealthy, and then you also have, what's the other guy's name? Subotai?
Subotai.
Yeah, Subotai, he walks around, he's fleet of foot, he's quiet. The actors made it all seem believable in the way that they physically embodied these characters.
I read that they asked Schwarzenegger to actually drop a few pounds of muscle because he was like too muscular. So he did all that training, but also had to like drop all the muscle that he'd been doing bodybuilding because he wasn't able to actually like lift the sword up over his head.
I mean, it's a big ass sword, and he's got to move it around a lot. And he's not the only big dude in this movie. There's a lot of huge dudes that also move quite well. What I really liked is you mentioned Subotai, we mentioned Valeria, all these characters that are coming in and they're forming fellowships. They didn't waste any time with that, and it reminded me a lot of like a Disney movie where it's just like, here's a character, okay, now they're working together. That's that. And at this point in the movie, you start to realize like this is going to be a frantic 2 hours. You're not going to catch your breath at all. It's just go, go, go. And after seeing a movie, like Casino last week, this is really refreshing because I saw 2 hours and I'm like, shit, another, fairly long movie, but this 2 hours flies by.
Can we talk about the snake cult of Thulsa Doom? I was reading that it's modeled after the flagellants. It's actually a true cult that arose in Germany during the Plague of Death around the 14th century. They sought out atonement for their sins by vigorously whipping themselves in public displays of penance. And you can see some of the characters when they show this first scene of the cult members that are wearing these like white gowns with the white hoods. And some of them are actually whipping themselves. So I found that pretty cool that he was pulling from, things that were pretty realistic.
I like how Kerri's like, I thought that this historical reference is really interesting. And I'm like, that giant snake is cool. Like that snake, the texture, the scales, the meatiness of that thing. It was so impressive. And again, you're like, this is 1982. And we've seen movies after this that, didn't quite stack up. And that sword through the jaw, it was just such a pleasure to watch. I was really into this fucking snake.
Yeah, but then fucking Arnold gets in like a headlock and he's like punching the snake in the head. It could easily have become ridiculous, but that shit was hilarious. And we talk about the budget, right? So the director, John Milius, he's renowned in Hollywood for just being a fucking wild man. Like he wrote Apocalypse Now, he wrote Conan, he wrote the series Rome, he did the original Red Dawn. He's a fucking wild man who the Coen brothers, they actually are friends with him and an admirer. They modeled, the Big Lebowski, Walter, the crazy ass Vietnam vet. Yeah. He is based on the real John Milius. So when they filmed this scene, they didn't have money for an archer. So John Milius goes, fuck it, I'll do it. He goes out there and he's the one firing the arrows into the snake. And Arnold is like 3 feet to the side, That shit wouldn't go down today, and no other director or writer would fucking have the balls to try that.
Side note, speaking of arrows, I don't know if I've ever told either of you this story that I was shot in the face with an arrow when I was 6 years old and I almost lost my eye.
Was it John Milius?
No, it was just some kid jumping on a fucking trampoline with a bow and arrow. And right when he jumped down, I was swinging on a hammock. The hammock came up, bow and arrow, right to the face. But I almost lost my eye. I had to wear an eye patch all of second grade.
Shut the fuck up.
I swear to God.
God help that fucking kid if he ever flatlines. It's just going to be fucking Kerri with an arrow in her head.
Remember me, bitch?
No, but the worst is that's before YouTube. If somebody had that shit on tape, that's like a fucking giant Rube Goldberg machine. You got the kid on the trampoline, he trips, knocks over, hits a guy with the bow and arrow, shoots you in the face, you have an eye patch. That's gold.
It would be on that Instagram, Kids Getting Hurt. I don't know if you've ever watched it. You probably don't because you've got a kid, but I don't. And I find kids getting hurt funny in a safe way, like not CPS getting hurt, but like kids tripping and falling and crying. It definitely would have made it, but nobody was videotaping it. I almost lost my eye. And every time I see any bow and arrow scenes like that, I have PTSD.
How old were you?
Six or seven. I was in the second grade.
Yeah, I bet that eye patch made you real cool in school.
Yeah.
So I feel like I missed something here when I was watching the movie. Again, very few complaints about this movie, but I had to rewind a couple times and I still can't figure out the mystery. What did they burgle that left them so rich? Like they seem to leave empty-handed from the temple and then suddenly they got all this money and gold and shit?
No. They left with that giant-ass ruby.
Yeah, not only that, they went downstairs. Arnold took the sigil, which looked like it was made out of emerald, or maybe what is it? What's the green stone?
It looked like it was made out of jade.
Yeah, so it's like a jade, the two snakes. They steal the giant ruby, but then Valeria was up on the floor above stealing the jewels. So when they sit down in the bar to share their spoils, that's where she dumps out all the smaller jewels and he puts out his.
Okay, that makes more sense. I was completely confused by that. What I did catch, though, was the fact that they were fucking getting high off their asses, which, again, these are not the heroes you're looking for. They're amazing people. Like, they're fun.
When I saw that when they were doing hallucinogens, I'm like, I could definitely pause this movie, get stoned, start it from the beginning, and really, really enjoy this fucking movie. I felt like the scene with the snake, as I was watching it, I'm like, I'm sober, and I'm loving this scene with the snake. Imagine in the 80s, like, kids getting stoned out of their minds watching this shit. Like, that is what fantasy movies are so good at doing.
But I don't think I picked up on it. Like, I even texted Gene. And I'm like, are they tripping balls and scaling the wall of the snake tower? That to me, if I'm going into battle, I'm going to, rob the organization that killed my parents. I want to do it clear-headed. Doing hallucinogens. I mean, he's so fucked up. He punches that camel. He's screaming at the women in town. They're all sluts. He's out of his head. But then it reminded me of college. Have you ever played, volleyball inside of a racquetball court?
Wall ball or handball or whatever?
Correct. Yeah, it was called volleyball. We played intramural sports in college, and I remember it was the championship game, and we thought it'd be a great idea to pound a handful of mushrooms. Now, you would think it would make it a mess, that we did poorly. To the contrary, it became the Matrix. I could see the angle deflections before they happened. We wiped the floor with them. So maybe the drugs actually helped Conan's performance.
No, I would have just been petting that snake for like 14 hours straight. I would have not gotten anything done.
So are you? So do you have a snake obsession? Like, are you a part of this cult? Because I know that you were mentioning like you're really into the dagger and shit like that. Like, was the aesthetic of the cult working for you?
I love all things cult. And that's why I felt like this didn't seem 80s. It seemed like it was set in like that 60s. That's when cults, 60s, 70s, the Charles Manson, all that. I love that kind of occult stuff, I guess you would call it, right? You call cults a cult.
That's right.
I'm terribly afraid of snakes in real life, but I love art that depicts snakes. And I actually have an obsession with that. I love the Ouroboros?
Ouroboros.
Borealis? The lights?
No, the Ouroboros.
Ouroboros.
Yeah, Big D, you know about that.
It's a snake eating itself.
Yeah, you know about it if you'd ever done a podcast about Westworld.
It's like the symbol of the snake eating itself. And I thought that dagger that the king is holding up was fucking badass. It was like brass knuckles, but kind of like an Ouroboros. The fucking listeners are going to slay me on this.
Okay, no more wine before the podcast. That's the new rule. But here's my question for you. Okay, as a woman, if you enjoy the cult, when you're watching it, the only option for you is to be one of the women topless, wearing like that little toga diaper. You don't see any female members. So like when you're watching this, are you like, fuck yeah, I want to be one of the virgins up there. I want to be in my little robe. Or are you thinking that you want to be one of the mullet bang wearing badasses?
Yeah, I want to be one of the mullet badasses. I want to be a cult leader. I want to wear the white robes with the painting on the side of it.
I just want to be the king. Like, the king was so righteously badass. He's like, oh, you want some rubies? Take them.
Yeah, like how the fuck, like Max von Sydow, he's amazing. Like out of the blue, he's in there for like 5 minutes. And the dialogue has to really compel. First of all, the first time you watch this, you think, oh shit, Arnold's in trouble. They've been caught. They obviously should have left town. But that dialogue, that little message when he says, there comes a time when the jewels cease to sparkle and the gold loses their luster and the throne becomes a prison and all that's left is a father's love for his child. It makes it realistic that Conan would risk his life to go save the daughter because of that relationship that he had with his mother and father and that had been broken. It's not just about jewels. If the king had said, oh, I'll give you all the wealth you want if you go save her, it doesn't seem as compelling an argument to make him do it. But because of that little interaction, you believe that Conan would leave the love of his life and go try to find this girl.
I feel like also in a way, Conan's looking into the future at himself. So the king, Osric, he's known as the usurper. And a usurper is somebody who kind of upsets the natural order, who flips things on their heads. And you could tell that Osric, he's impressed by Conan and his compatriots. And he basically says exactly that he's like, I'm really impressed by you guys. And I think Conan is seeing, when you become a ruler and you become older and this is the path that you take, this is the cycle here. And so I thought that was really cool that they seem to have a little bit of a bond there. Other great chemistry though was Conan and Valeria. Again, not something I expected out of this movie, this romance that just blindsided me.
The chemistry between those two is fantastic. They have the robbery together. They go back to the hut. They've been drinking. It looks like they have sex maybe 3 or 4 times. They take a break for wine. They're feeding grapes. They're eating. It seems like a believably good time. And then I went back and I said, holy shit, what has Conan actually said to her? And I realized that Conan in the entire movie says 5 words to Valeria. You're not a guard and no. That's the entire interaction they have. So if that sex scene doesn't make us believe their relationship is real, the dialogue's not going to do it.
Yeah, we're 1 hour into the movie and we're at our 3rd sex scene. And also in 1 hour, Arnold has said no more than 5 words. He's literally mute up until this point in the film. And then when he does talk, it's like these very dense line where, the wizard is talking to him about his solitude and being off radar. And Arnold just looks at him and is like, do flowers grow here? And I'm like, what? I don't know if they're just trying to make him look simple or it's Arnold's inability to actually carry on a dialogue.
Oh, no. I mean, you found the perfect match in this actor and character, right? So Conan the Barbarian he grew up very, very strong. They taught him some things. I mean, he did go to school. He learned about poetry and all this stuff, but he's a brute. His heart is good, but he's brutal. And so I think that this is a perfect match between him and Arnold. And he can just embody this thing. Like, you don't need him to talk a lot because a barbarian wouldn't talk a lot. In fact, I would say that movies today get it wrong. They have these characters that are supposed to be a barbarian or the Hulk or whatever they are, and they're just overly verbose. It's all one-liners, and it's like, no, this guy wouldn't talk much.
I think also when you don't say much, you're mysterious. It's like when I was single, I used to think people do more to talk themselves out of getting laid than they do talking themselves into getting laid. If you just shut the fuck up sometimes, you seem mysterious. But when people start talking too much, you figure people out right away. And I think Conan's lack of, or not a real strong grasp of the English language helped him. Because for as little as he says, I think this is one of his better performances.
I feel like you should have advised me a little earlier in life, Big D, because, you know, I'm walking around, you know, over 6 feet tall. I've got the long black hair, the dark clothes, and I'm mysterious until I'm like, hey, so I've got a podcast, and also I volunteer at the dog shelter, and also I host a video game league night. And do you like watching soccer by any chance?
Just post selfies of yourself brooding at the the senior prom in the corner. Girls will eat that shit up.
Yes.
Disguised as a priest, Conan infiltrates the temple, but he is discovered, captured, and tortured. Doom lectures him on the power of flesh, which he demonstrates by hypnotically enticing a girl to leap to her death. He then orders for Conan to be crucified on the Tree of Woe. Conan is rescued by Subotai. The wizard Akiro summons spirits to heal Conan and warns that they will, quote, exact a heavy toll, which Valeria is willing to pay. These spirits also try to abduct Conan, but he is restored to health after Valeria and Subotai fend them off. So I got to start with Conan's infiltration of the cult. I got kind of a homoerotic like vibe from the Catholic or from the priest. And I had to look it up and I was like, wait, this is like priest scandal, right? Nope, wrong. The Catholic priest scandal had actually had sporadic coverage in the 80s there, right around this time. And so I got this vibe. I don't know if you got this vibe too. Was the point of this scene that Conan seduced the priest? Was that intentional?
What world are you in? Okay, I wrote, what the fuck? That priest or that brother sees Arnold all looking big and juicy, and he comes over and says, hi, brother. You're so big and so well grown. You should be proud of your body. He's trying to seduce Arnold 100%. And then Arnold, again, great acting, says, I'm shy. Can we go over here and I'll show you myself? Did the priest think he was going to get a blowjob, or what was he thinking was going to happen there?
Well, yeah, as most things religious, I was creeped the fuck out by this scene and this priest. And when Arnold's like, I'm afraid, I'm ashamed. But then he just fucking elbow bombs him and steals his clothes.
It would have been better if you see him stripping off the robe and the dude sitting there knocked out with an erection. And how the fuck did Arnold fit in that dude's fucking robe?
I know, that's what I was thinking. I'm like, the guy can't fit in anything. And this is like puny little priest. And he just totally walks in, all nonchalant. Nobody recognizes him. Hello, brother. Hello, brother.
But look, I'm glad that they did it this way. Arnold, he's a barbarian. He's a strongman. He is not a fucking spy. He is not a ninja. His attempt to get into this cult, to infiltrate it, hasn't been too well thought out. He's carrying around, again, that jade sigil. He's showing it to everyone. Everyone's got to know that was stolen in the robbery at the fucking tower. And he's like, here, brother, showing the thing. And he's walking around, not even trying to blend in. He stole one of the robes that has the orange, adornment on it. So when he is caught almost right away, I was like, thank God. If he actually infiltrated the fucking tower, I would have called bullshit.
So is that how he's caught? I was so confused. I'm like, how the fuck did they spot him? I mean, Thulsa's up there in the middle of a speech talking about emptiness and death, and everyone's just starts yelling infidel. I'm like, how do they know? I mean, he's wearing is it the jade thing he had?
Yeah, because he's walking and the first two guards let him go. Then he gets to that like waiting pool and the girl says, what do you see? And he goes, infinity. And she's like, all right, I guess you can pass. But the next guard actually takes it from him. And that's when he actually walks over and in the background gives it to somebody else. And that's when they kind of circle up and realize who he is.
I like that Kerri and I were perplexed by Conan the Barbarian, and Big D had to explain to us the plot of Conan the Barbarian. I feel really dim right now.
It's because he's so much wiser than we are.
Oh, Jesus.
Well, he's got all those years.
Yes.
But okay, so he gets caught, and then it's not an immediate death for him, of course, and he's very adamant about letting them know. Again, rare lines that are spoken by Conan. They're supposed to have great impact. He says, basically, this is for my mom and dad.
I thought he gave it all up way too quick. He doesn't even try to hold in his vendetta. You killed my mother and father. You ransacked the village. I'm here for revenge. Man, keep that shit close to the vest, because when someone knows you're coming for him, you got to kill him.
Yeah, but like, Doom's killed 30 or 40 moms and dads. Like, that's not, he's going to be like, yeah, you're going to have to narrow it down. Which one's that again? This takes us to the point of the movie, though, where where it started sort of falling apart for me. And that was after Conan is on the Tree of Woe and Akira, the wizard, is healing whatever. And then the spirits show up to like take him away or whatever. The movie, I think, at this point got a little overly ambitious with the effects. Akiro's constant babbling was just starting to annoy me. I didn't dig this part at all.
You honestly didn't like that scene?
Yeah, I didn't care for it, no.
Dude, look, they obviously didn't have money or the technology. I thought what they did was low tech, and it was simple. They didn't try to draw ghosts. They made it kind of blurry, and it wasn't too clear when they were flying around Arnold. He looked badass even just with all the calligraphy written on him, and they had him wrapped up like a cigar. I thought they did something that was effective with what they could actually pull off on screen.
Yeah, I loved the scene with the spirits. I thought, like you said, low budget, but they didn't put any specific visual things that I'm picking apart. They kind of left it elusive. And the way he was wrapped up. Have you guys ever seen that Ingmar Bergman film where the guy draped in the black thing plays death and he plays chess with that guy? I thought that he looked like death wrapped up like that. So I don't know if he was pulling from that, but if it wasn't a reference, I thought it was. I loved it. And I love that, Valeria wakes him at being like the most romantic thing I've ever heard. She says, "All the gods, they cannot sever us. If I were dead and you were still fighting for your life, I'd come back from the darkness, back from the pit of hell to fight by your side." This is when the movie becomes like a romance. If I ever get married again, those are my vows.
Get married again?
I will come back from the pits of hell and fight by your side.
So you're saying that you didn't stand by your first husband and battle with him at the pits of hell?
I did. He didn't.
Oh, okay. So you let the demons take him.
Yeah, the 21-year-old demons took him.
So with that line though, I think what's interesting is there's also a bit of foreshadowing there, which I didn't really pay attention to that part. Surprise, surprise. And so when later we see Valeria make a reappearance, I was confused until I actually read the plot and went, "Oh, that's what's going on." So moving on to that part. So Conan, Subotai, and Valeria, they raid the Temple of Set as the cult is indulging in a cannibalistic orgy. The trio flee with the princess, but Conan is unable to engage Doom, who has, of course, magically transformed into a large snake and slithered away. Valeria is mortally wounded, and she dies in Conan's arms. By using booby traps and exploiting the terrain, Conan, Subotai, and the wizard battle Doom's warriors when they arrive. Valeria reappears as a Valkyrie to save Conan from a mortal blow, and the battle ends with Conan having recovered his father's sword from his enemies, a sword splintered by his own.
God, where do we start here? Do we start with the raid, with the orgy?
First, the orgy. Right.
Okay, orgy goes first.
When you were just reading the description, cannibalistic orgy, were they eating each other? I didn't see that.
Okay, so it starts off and they've got their zebra stripe body paint camouflage. And I'm like, what the fuck are they camouflaged for? I'm like, is this an IMX concert? What's going on? And I was like, no, it's actually for the world's laziest orgy. And Big D, you and I talked about this, about what the fuck is with in the 80s? They didn't get up in orgies. Everyone was laying down and just kind of slowly writhing.
No, you got to hide all the dicks. Because imagine you had 15 dudes there. Say some dude rolls over and you see, him just all in his majesty, standing at attention. You could ruin the whole shot. You can't go back in there and CGI it out. So you just tell everybody lay on top of each other, cover each other's genitals, and we'll be good.
They had clothes on still. What were they trying to not let their dicks slip out? They were wearing chaps and fur still. The only one that was naked was the girl chained to the pillar.
No, it looked like it was loose hanging, like a linen diaper. You could easily pull that to the side. So that's, but I got to tell you, I mentioned before with Excalibur and this, as a 10-year-old, I didn't know what the fuck I was watching, but I liked it. I really did like it. It confused me a little bit, but I liked it.
So I think the cannibalistic part is that the big soup that they bring out. I think there's human bodies in there because when Conan dumps the soup over, there's body parts falling out of that green gruel.
I didn't get it. I thought it was just like the Haley's Comet Kool-Aid. It's Soylent Green. So I think it's important to talk about Valeria's death at this point. I mean, it's kind of a pivotal moment in the film. And a lot of critics said that, she was over-sexualized. She was just a sidekick, a female sexy sidekick for Conan. But I, as a woman, felt like she was this like strong equal, like his partner, and she kicked a ton of fucking ass. And, she dies, and before he lights her on fire, I felt like Conan truly honors her. And I think the critics were more focused on her outfits or shown, her sexuality in a negative light, which I think dates, feminism in the 80s, where now it's more widely accepted that you can be both sexy and strong and the two aren't opposing or conflicting. But for fuck's sake, she comes back to life in this like metallic, beautiful, shiny mirror thing, and she saves his fucking life. Like, she's the true hero of this film.
You want to talk about badass? Sandahl Bergman, the actress, she actually lost the tip of one of her fingers filming one of the sword fight scenes. This was not a damsel in distress. She was Arnold's equal.
Yeah, she's scaling those walls. She saves the fucking princess. Like, she captures her. And Conan never has to save her from anything, And even when she dies, he honors her. And it's like respectful. He seemed genuinely loving her. So I see what they're saying, that like everyone in this movie is sexualized and skimpy. I'm like, the whole fucking movie's sexualized. It's like a fucking orgy.
But they had a perfect opportunity. When Valeria's leaving, she's the last one to leave the temple, and she's trapped. I was like, oh fuck, here comes Conan to save her. No way. She fights off these 4 dudes on her own. They made a point to prove that she was strong.
And she does that badass, she slaps the sword on her palm before she runs up the wall and fucking guts that guy. It's pretty great. So Conan sneaks back into the temple where Doom is addressing the members of his cult. He confronts Doom, who receives him with open arms and attempts to mesmerize him, but the barbarian resists and uses his father's broken sword to behead his nemesis. After the disillusioned cultists disperse, Conan burns down the temple and returns the princess. I took this as a change in Conan, in the sense that after Valeria dies, I thought he was going to fuck that princess. And he just was like, all right, let's go. He drew the line.
Well, it's a job. He's getting paid.
Yeah.
The king didn't say, hey, go save my daughter and have sex with her.
Yeah, but she's a part of a cult. Like, she's been fucked a million. Nobody's going to know.
She'll know. Are you fucking kidding me?
It's called consent, Gene.
Yeah, okay. I don't think Conan was asking for consent earlier in the movie. So I think that theory goes right out the window. And honestly, I think if he went back to the king and was like, the king would be like, yeah, you're Conan. I kind of expected this. So now's the time in the movie where we will rate it on our patented Shat meter. If you haven't listened to the podcast before or need a brushing up on your Shat meter etiquette, the Shat meter starts at a score of 0 to 5, 0 being a perfect movie reserved only for the greatest films that we've seen. 5 is an absolute turd. The worst movie would take 5 wipes to get off your ass. Big D, let's start with you. What's your score for Conan the Barbarian?
So Roger and I have been debating the last few reviews. I had problems with his scores. So yesterday when I texted him, he's in Toronto, and I said, I think Conan the Barbarian is a top 10 movie. He wrote me back like, what the fuck is wrong with you? And he posted a meme on Twitter about how out of my mind I was. But I think this is. Maybe it's not a top 10 movie of all time, but in the 58, maybe this is movie 59 we're doing, this is definitely in our top 12 movies that we've done. There's something to be said for a good old-fashioned, muscle-bound action adventure. And this is quintessential 80s cinema. It was gritty. It was real. Conan is like primitive. And this movie single-handedly catapulted Schwarzenegger into movie stardom. I think if you want a swordplay flick, they do not get any better than this. And for me, I'm shocked to say, I think it is a one-wipe movie. It was a thoroughly enjoying 2 hours with a story that was equally enjoyable to watch, to listen, and to even talk about today. So I think one wipe.
All right, that's one wipe from Big D. I agree with you, Big D. Everything you said, plus this one fact. It took me a long time to figure out what it is that I love about this movie. I mean, obviously, it's all the stuff that you mentioned, the grit, the storytelling, that primitive mythic feel, but there was something else about it, and I couldn't put my finger on it. And then it hit me. This movie, Conan the Barbarian, plays a lot like a great Disney movie. There's an imperfect hero who has something that he's got to solve, some sort of a tragedy. Then you introduce a bunch of memorable characters that are highly marketable very quickly, and they don't all make sense, but that's okay. And then you make the plot so fun that you don't care if it makes sense, right? Like everything's just happening. And then you pepper it with unforgettable scenes. Like you could tell me right now to sit down with a piece of paper and write down every scene in Casino, and I would have some trouble. If you told me right now to sit down and write every scene in Conan the Barbarian, I could write down in detail everything that happens in this movie. And I think that's really important. So you just take that Disney formula and then you just add orgies, beheadings, and womanizing, and you've got Conan the Barbarian. And so it's a Disney movie for adults. I think it's a great formula. It works for me, and I agree with you. It's a one wipe movie for me. Kerri Gross, what do you got going on?
I'll say I was a little nervous about, after seeing the trailer. I'm like, here we go, a 1980s cheesy fantasy film that's like super macho, but I fucking loved this movie. I mean, they nail it. This has to be one of the best fantasy movies I've seen. And I'm a huge fantasy sci-fi nerd. I thought it was in the same vein as Dune. And I know some people hate Dune, but I loved Dune. I feel like they just nail it. The costumes, it's not cheesy. You said womanizing in your review, and, people think it's over-sexualized, but I thought they had a very strong female character. And I didn't hate Arnold Schwarzenegger in it. Like, there's Running Man where I'm like, oh God, I just can't with the Schwarzenegger. I can't. They could have put somebody else. But he says in an interview that he feels like he was born to play this role, and he's not wrong. Like, it was definitely made for him. I would watch it again. It's hard for me to give it a perfect score just because I feel like I've seen better movies in general. But for what this is as a fantasy film, sword slaying. I'm giving it one wipe.
All right, so that's one wipe from Big D, one wipe from me, and one wipe from Kerri Gross, which is really easy to calculate. I think that might be one of our first unanimous scores other than a perfect score. One wipe all across brings us to an average of one wipe for Conan the Barbarian. Big D, where does that put that on the Shat movie scale?
So mission accomplished, for what I texted Raj. That puts it in the 10 spot. It is behind Empire Strikes Back, but it's better than 7 and Coming to America.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It is really.
What was that? What was your problem there? Coming to America?
The face that I was making. No. The face I was making is that it feels wrong to say a movie like this is at the same level as 7. And I know what you're going to say. I gave 7 a lower score, and that's true. And I take responsibility for that. But I guess what I'm saying is that 7 is so polished. There's so much attention to detail. It's such a higher caliber of production. And also, of course, has the Nine Inch Nails on the soundtrack, which doesn't hurt. But for what it was, I've seen better procedurals than 7. I've seen few better fantasy movies than Conan the Barbarian.
And that's exactly it. You're not directly comparing Conan to, let's say, The Breakfast Club. They're so completely different things. But what you have to do is compare it to other movies in the genre. You're never going to be able to compare, like, let's say, Raising Arizona, Home Alone. They're all so different. But for what this movie is, if you know you're coming in for some sword-swinging action, it surprises. It's surprisingly good. I don't think there's a better one that I've seen. And I think a lot of the action movies that we're going to do are now going to be held against this benchmark.
Well, and I feel like what they were up against for the vote, like this by far supersedes all of those.
Yeah, as much as I love the Queen soundtrack to Flash Gordon, this blows Flash Gordon and Clash of the Titans out of the water.
And on Twitter, the emotional, visceral response from our followers on Twitter, people were coming out of the woodwork saying, I love this movie. This is a great movie. This is one of my favorites. And I was half kind of thinking, are you guys fucking kidding me? And then when I watched it, I got it.
One of my favorites was, longtime listener, Coach Marcus, said that he works out to the Conan the Barbarian soundtrack, which I'm like, why have I not done this before? So, Coach Marcus, just for you this weekend, I'm going down to LA Fitness on Gilbert and the 202, and I'm pumping iron to the Conan the Barbarian soundtrack.
Have you seen the snakes? Well, snakes, tell me. I need a spot.
All right, so that brings us to the point in the podcast where we do the shout-outs. We have a very special one. Big D set up a voicemail where people could call in and leave some feedback, and we got our first one, and it's a great one. So Jake Davis from Walnut Ridge, Arkansas, called in with some his opinion on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and I can't do it any better than he can. So take it away, Jake.
What's up, guys? This is Zach Davis, Walnut Ridge, Arkansas. You guys done listening to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? Y'all read a few of my emails during the Game of Thrones podcast. I've been listening since Westworld. Just got done listening to Big D. Man, I love that movie. You just crushed my soul hating on it that bad. But I do kind of agree. I went back and watched it myself. Little rough. Rogers 0.75. Little too low. But, you know, I done knocked it about a 3.5, just because I do love Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. But great podcast, guys. Keep it up. And, Gene, you're awesome, too. See you later.
I love you, Big D. Raj, you can suck my dick. Gene, you're cool, too. Westworld.
Represent. Too low.
Thanks, Jake, for being our first caller. That was rad.
No, I mean, that's what makes the podcast worth doing. I mean, we've said it a million times before. We don't get paid for this, but, you know, all the riches in the world can't bring you the joy of hearing Jake say, Westworld.
Yeah, that fucking made my day. That shit was good. I want to make that my ringtone.
We listened to it 100 times.
Yes, that should be my ringtone. Westworld.
Too low.
Yep. So if you guys want to call the number, 914-719-SHAT. And if you got something entertaining to say about some of our reviews, give us a call. We'd appreciate it.
All right. So we've talked about the voicemail. Now, Big D, I think it's time. People are all wondering what they're going to hear next from Shat the Movies. What do you got?
Jesus, we go from Schwarzenegger to the legend Jean-Claude Van Damme. It is the best of Jean-Claude. In last place was Kickboxer. Second place, Double Impact. In third place was Bloodsport, and the winner by a very close vote. It came down again. We had 1,000 total votes, and the winner by 9 votes was Time Cop, 1994.
It's amazing because, you know, I was really pulling for Bloodsport because it's the one I've seen the most. I'm a big fan of Bloodsport. But Time Cop, I feel, gives us so much more material to work with. Anytime you introduce time travel into a movie, it becomes a Shat classic right off the bat.
Dude, time travel and Jean-Claude. Do you remember the split he does?
Oh, yeah, between the two chairs or whatever?
There's water, like, on the floor, and there's the thug with the taser. So the guy shoots the taser into the ground, and Jean-Claude does, like, that split on his countertop on a table to save himself while the other guy electrocutes. Oh, it's going to be good.
It's almost as good as his post-coital split in Bloodsport, where he bangs the chick out and then goes to the hotel and just does the splits across 2 pillars.
Does he really?
Yeah, he's got to cool off his balls or something. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. Anyway, that concludes this week's episode of Shat the Movies. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat the Movies. Facebook, search for Shat the Movies Podcast. The website is shatthemovies.com. If you'd like to write in with your suggestion for a category and nominate some movies for voting, you can go to hosts@shatthemovies.com or just give us some feedback. We're everywhere fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, and if you stop by iTunes, please be sure to leave a 5-star review that helps the podcast grow. Also, you can check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review TV series such as Game of Thrones, Taboo, and American Gods. Also, Westworld is just around the corner, coming up in April, so we'll have some fresh Westworld updates coming up soon. You can find all that information on our website, shatontv.com. On behalf of my co-hosts, Big D, Dick Ebert, and Kerri Gross, I'm Gene Lyons. Be sure to join us next time for a review of Time Cop.
Doing, partner?
Ex-partner.
Let me go, Max. Like, I'm not hurting anybody.
Got to take you back.
In the year 2004, time travel is a reality.
You're charged with violations of TEC Code 40.8, time travel with intent to alter the future.
And a crime.
It turns out going back in time is a pretty easy way to make money.
I think you got yourself a shipment of gold that you're taking to General Lee.
The genie is already out of the bottle. The technology is there.
Now, one man
You ever hear the name Aaron McComb?
is about to take the ultimate power trip.
He's gonna be president.
You don't need the press, you don't need endorsements, you don't even need the truth. You need money.
But to enforce the laws of time,
Are we still together in 10 years? Am I dead?
one man is determined to stop him.
I cannot go back to save her. This scumbag is not going back to steal money. Stay here, Walker. My future, you're dead.
I think you planned too far ahead.
Jean-Claude Van Damme, Ron Silver,
Will you get him?
Mia Sara,